Our sorry.
All right, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days to join us here. Wanted to thank you very much for coming and joining us to talk through our webinar, Why 2025 Will Be a Great Year for Builders. Quick introduction, I'm Brett Steele, VP of Sales with Enter Now, and with me today are a couple of our distinguished guests. But we've all seen, before I introduce them, we've all kind of seen the headlines lately, okay? So, there are a lot of headwinds that are constantly being talked about in the industry, and things seem to change every day, it seems. But what we want to talk about is what are those opportunities for us to still shine, all right? So there are a lot of sales and marketing people on this call today, and we want to basically highlight, where are the opportunities for greatness within each of our companies? Where are the opportunities for us to really shine? Because not everything is going to be great all the time. We've all been through COVID. It's been essentially 5 years since the start of COVID, and a lot has happened over that time. But there are always opportunities for greatness. So that's what we want to focus on today. Joining me are three amazing professionals that will help us dive deeper into this topic. Okay, so starting us out will be Dan White, who's the lead market strategist with New Homestar. He'll be walking us through, what is the environment today? What's the latest economic backdrop? Eric Ficke, the Senior Business Development Manager with New Homestar, will be walking us through some buyer insights and showing us where some of the opportunities lie within this current environment. And last but certainly not least, Sarah Titus, our Marketing Manager and Graphic Designer with Eastbrook Homes. She will give us the marketing perspective on the current environment. So before we get into this, I want to see a quick show of hands who's going to IBS. Okay, if you raise your hand on a webinar where we can't see you, then congratulations. But don't feel bad, because there are also, I can guarantee you, going to be people listening to the recording of this who also raise their hands. So IBS is next week, and I had this conversation with my wife the other day, trying to figure out, who do you think it's more tiring for? Is it the builder side, or is it as a vendor? So I want to see a quick poll if you think it's going to be the vendors or the builders who are more tired about this. And if anyone has done both, I want to hear from you. Eric, I think you've done both.
Yeah, yes, I have, Brett, but not as a builder. But I can tell you that I'm probably leaning for on the vendor side. It's a lot of time on our feet, and it doesn't really stop or start before or after, because it keeps going, especially when it's it's in Vegas. I think I would enjoy an opportunity to see it from more of a participant side, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. We are going to hop into this. Now, as marketing and sales professionals, which are most of you on this call are, we wear a lot of different hats. And I want to start today kind of putting on our data hat and shifting things to Dan. So Dan, can you walk us through the current economic environment?
Yeah, Brett, thanks for letting me join here and just help frame things in for this conversation, because I think it is one that I think builders are looking to have in some capacity of, what's the current landscape and what does this mean for the next 90 days, 6 months, 12 months, what's the outlook? And I think when we look at data, we talk a lot about this balancing act that we have. We're trying to balance anecdotal data that we're hearing from so many builders and from customers with objective data that we get in reports. We're trying to balance out national statistics with very important local and regional statistics. And then the last big balancing act that we always do is balancing a data point, a single data release, with a data trend, and trying to figure out this Venn diagram of all these things, what is important, what can we do about it, what's actionable, what does this mean for me? So there's dozens of data points that we track on a very regular basis, and that other organizations track too. But for this presentation, I really just want to go through a couple of the main hard-hitting ones just to help frame things in. The first one we're going to be looking at here is mortgage rates. This has been the conversation for the last handful of years, really since the beginning of 2022, with the Fed raising interest rates. Mortgage rates obviously followed suit. The reason to bring this up in a presentation about builder optimism and why we should feel good about it is the level that they're landing at right now, while still elevated in recent history, is a little bit more stable, relatively speaking. If you were to zoom out, obviously we would see this still at low levels relative to some historical highs. But the very fact that there's certainly going to be volatility between given weeks in a couple of months, we have seen this level out kind of in that mid-6 range, which, when we're asking customers to take a bit of a leap of faith and envision what their life is going to look like in 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, whatever our build time is, volatility and things shifting beneath their feet can really be at odds with that. So having these mortgage rates plateau, even at higher levels, is a welcome sight. The other end of this is that this actually provides a huge opportunity for builders. And I think many builders have been able to capitalize on the fact that they have the ability to put together really targeted, good, impactful incentives to customers. And we expect that to be the operating norm for many months. As these mortgage rates remain elevated, builders are going to continue to beat existing homes in certain markets by using these mortgage rate incentives and whatnot. Something to keep an eye on, and I think Sarah can speak to this more from the marketing side as well, is this idea of incentive fatigue. They've kind of lost a lot of their punch in a lot of areas. You're just expecting it. So being able to keep incentives fresh, being able to connect still on a very emotional level with customers, is something that builders are going to struggle with and have to contend with throughout the course of this year.
Yeah, I love hearing my father-in-law tell me that, well, my first house was in 1981 and my mortgage rate was 18%. And it's like, nobody cares. We get that but it's all relative, right? So you're also earning 15% in your savings account at that point. So it's one of those situations where, like, buyers don't care what the historical average is. Buyers don't care about, what it used to be and like where it was. We're finally getting to that period of stability where buyers just care about what it is today.
That's right. That's right. If we head to our next slide here, this is the other big conversation point. It's about inflation. Now, I know this graph can look a little busy. There's a lot of lines, and I'm going to break it down really quickly for us here. Basically, we're tracking two major inflation metrics. It's the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and PCE, the Personal Consumption Expenditures. And there's core versions of each of those, which strip out more volatile elements like food and fuel and whatnot, so we can get maybe closer to a core reading. We like to graph these lines over wage growth as well, and that yellow line with wages really helps you indicate whether we're in an inflationary environment or a deflationary environment. So you can see, kind of before the COVID ramp up, wages were outpacing the costs of goods and services, therefore we're in a deflationary environment. You can see where it flipped during COVID, and you can see really at the end of 2022 where it flipped back, where wages have continued to outpace the growth of costs and goods and services. So when we hear about this soft landing that the Fed was trying to manage, really they were trying to tame inflation, make costs more stable, but also not drive up unemployment. That kind of speaks to the dual mandate that the Fed has. So we have seen inflation go down. Their stated goal was 2%. We have still remained shy of that, and it's kind of turned into a little bit of a bumpy landing around those marks, but we haven't seen it reaccelerate in a dramatic sense yet. Yes, the most recent headline with CPI showed that the headline inflation increased a little bit more than even what some analysts had anticipated. But core CPI, when you strip out some of those more volatile elements, was stable. And the Fed stated that they're okay with headline inflation increasing in a short period of time as long as they're not seeing that same trend on the core side. And so really, again, speaks to that balancing act of balancing data points and data trends, which ones mean which thing and which ones to watch. So that's really the current state of inflation as it sits right now.
Yeah, and just like we'll see on the builder side, how builders are looking for stability, there's nobody that wants more stability than the Fed, especially when it comes to their dual mandate and the things that they care about most. So this is one of the aspects of that dual mandate. Let's get into the other part.
And flipping to the other side is maintaining strength within the labor markets. And consistently, there's been strong consumer spending, which has helped elevate and buoy the labor markets as well. This is the current unemployment rate. So even with those inflation numbers that maybe came in a little elevated, January unemployment actually ticked down just to pinch back to 4.0. If we look at the 10-year average, the unemployment's been at 4.8. If you look back even further, about the 25-year average unemployment's closer to 5.7. So we're still below those lines. And I think, again, what Brett's saying and what we like to see is that line not sharply increase. Of course, there's going to be variations in different seasons and different months, but the fact that it is returning to a norm, deviating back towards a norm, and it's remaining relatively flat with no gigantic ups and downs. That's really what we're looking to and hoping to see that trend continue through this year.
Yeah. All right. So that's kind of like the headlines of the economics that anyone in like that's following the economy, that's what they're going to see. But I want to dive a little bit into what are the things that people should care about that are within this industry.
So again, so many data points here we could pick out. I want to start with home prices. We'll start right out of the gate. Home prices. When we graph out the median new home single family price versus the median existing single family home, this is where we're seeing those elevated prices right now. And typically there's a premium if we go back about 20 years and look at the average new home premium. It's been right around 17.5%. Right now, with the latest data in December, the new home premium was only 4.3%. So new home prices have moderated. Existing home prices have accelerated and at a different level. So we've seen that new home premium narrow. And in some markets, it's still larger, still closer to what historic level might be. And in other areas, it's even inverted. It's much more expensive to own an existing home versus a new home. That speaks again to that balancing of looking at national data versus local data. But still looking at this at a national trend, there has never been a time in recent history at the sustained level where new homes can be very easily entered to versus existing homes. Typically, builders and sales associates are having to kind of upsell this larger new home premium of 10, 15, 20% at a certain market. All things being equal, customers overwhelmingly say that they want a new product. And especially in today's, buyer psychology environment where they're looking for that stability and dependability and reliability, a new home offers that infinitely more than an existing home could. And that's really been more of the conversation about the benefits of a new home versus the cost right now, because builders have done a really good job of tailoring down their product and their lot size and their feature level to make sure they are able to deliver, homes that people can get into.
Yeah, and I see Sarah being like, okay, when I see something like this, that opens up a lot of stories, right? So if you do the math of this, for everyone, did the math for you, but on a $300,000 home, that's 13K more. Okay, on a $400,000 home, that's 17K more. And with some builder incentives, is basically a break even, right? So there are a lot of stories to be told here. And I'm excited to get into some of those with Sarah and even with Eric on the buyer side for what salespeople can do about that.
So as we jump into this next metric here, this is where the prices and those interest rates come together into affordability. There's a couple different metrics that we look at and the different organizations use to measure it. There are some pros and cons with every single measure. So the major one that we talk through is the National Association of Realtors Housing Affordability Index. That's in that yellow line there. And the watermark for it is that line on the 100. And short term, basically, you could say if the line's above 100, that means the median family, the typical family, can qualify for the typical home. And if it's below 100, they don't have enough income. The typical family cannot qualify for the typical home. The key word with this is qualify. We all know that there could be a difference between being able to qualify for something and then being able to actually afford it and feel that payment on a monthly and yearly basis. So that's the kind of the one flaw with that measure. The other measure that we look at is that blue line. It's the cost of housing index from the NHAB. And they ask a little bit of a different question. They say, what percent of the typical family's income must go towards the typically priced home? And I think, a lot of the feedback you normally get around that answer is, 30% should be the number. And we typically see that as what it should be as well. And right now they're measuring it to be 38. So they're saying that, yes, we have to the typical family has to put a sizable chunk more of their income to afford the typical priced home. So the different definitions for affordability can change a couple different things. Either way, it still offers opportunities for builders to put together creative, specific deals and incentives with customers that just those same tools don't exist on the existing home side.
Yeah, and I like the NAHB's kind of methodology a lot better just because the HAI, like that qualification, when they do those calculations, they assume you don't save a penny for your savings, a penny for your 401k. You're not paying health insurance. You're not doing anything but paying your mortgage. So I'm glad NAHB's got a much more accurate reading of that.
Okay, next graph we're going to look into real quick is new home sales specifically, and this is single family, and this is the non-seasonally adjusted number. So this is the actual monthly sales. I think the next graph we'll get into is the seasonally adjusted annual rate, and that's usually the big number that kind of gets some of the highlights. But if you want to look at the trend that's actually happening, you can zoom out a little bit and look at this non-seasonally adjusted number. And what really speaks to me when I see a graph like this is you're seeing the seasonality of our last four and a half market cycles here on this graph. What speaks to me is that the high points have gotten lower through each one of those cycles, but the low points have also increased over the last three. That low point on these last three cycles has been in November typically, and we're seeing that bottom continue to come up and up as well. So that speaks to me saying that there is some stability over the course of these market cycles that is still trending back towards what this average should be. So less high highs, but less low lows. And that's something that I think buyers are looking for and builders are looking for too, just again, more reliability, coming from the sales.
Yeah, less volatility means builders can actually strategize for the long term. And Eric will hop into some of the opportunities for builders there. But yeah, let's keep going here, Dan.
Yeah, let's zoom out again. We'll look at that big number. That's that big seasonally adjusted annual rate number. You can see here on the yellow line, it's the existing home sales. And I took a 20-year average. And again, you can put together different average timeframes. You can use a 5 or a 10, and with some of these data points, you can use a 50-year time frame. I used 20 for this one just to illustrate cleanly on the graph that the typical annual rate for existing home sales is just over 4.5 million, and currently we're at 3.8 million. So you can see the gap between where that average is and where existing home sales are. You've seen some spurts in these last couple market cycles of trying to deviate back up towards that norm. And we'll see how long this market cycle is able to maintain that as well and try to get us back on that pace. And really, the sales is a lagging indicator of the inventory that's been on the market on the existing home side. When we look at the new home market share currently in December, it was right around 15%, but that number deviated over the course of the last handful of cycles up to 30% in some cases, where new homes made up a large lion's share of the sales. And each local market is a little bit specific in that point too, whereas in some, again, new homes make up almost over 50% of certain markets in the country as well. So that's one that you would want to be more in tune with your local area on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know, quick shout out to the John Burns team. I know they do very detailed regional analysis for some of this. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out to them. All right, let's look at construction costs.
Yeah, this is probably one of the questions we get the most from builders right now is what's going to happen to my costs. This graph, again, looking back at just 5 years, we look at a couple of different measures. We look at the construction cost index from the U.S. Census Bureau and HUD, and we look at the producer price index, and we break it down very specifically to the single family residential new construction. We look at these non-seasonally adjusted indexes, and we break those out even further between the goods side of the equation and the services side. On the good side, I use the core metrics, so we strip out food and energy, some of those more volatile numbers. When we look at all these, the level itself is not as important as the trend. And so when we're looking at, the gray and the yellow lines from the PPI, those numbers have been very flat, relatively speaking to the last handful of market cycles, which is what we want. There's been a little more deviation, a little more volatility on the construction cost index. But if you were to draw out a trend line over the last just 3 market cycles, you see a very flat trend line, which is music to the ears of many builders that just want things to not get any more expensive or difficult. So year over year, goods prices are only up 2%, and services and even the CCI index are even down a pinch, pretty flat, which is what we would want to see. This data is probably the one I have the biggest asterisks around right now because there is a lot of yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty around it. Tariffs are the things getting the biggest headlines, but there's supply chain disruption components to this. There could be immigration and labor force elements that could be a component of this too, and there's just a lot of question marks. Just as quickly as a policy is presented and implemented, it can change, it can implement it too. And we've seen some volatility on that front. And I think we're going to see some of these construction cost indices and other ones too be a little bit of a lag behind some of these policies that are put in place. So we're going to continue to watch them closely. What I like to tell builders right now is, it's an old adage, I think it's probably getting beat to death at the moment, but make hay while the sun is shining. We don't know what traffic is going to look like later this year. We don't know what policy is going to look like, what trade relations, what material costs, you can name it. We don't know. And right now, all things considered, when we zoom out, it's an okay environment to be operating in. We understand what our costs are today. We understand what our customer basis is today. Let's go make sales. Look for reasons to put contracts together versus reasons to say no. Is really a lot of the feedback that we're getting and giving to builders at the moment.
Yeah, and it goes back to one of the old adages of any business, right? Control what you can control. And this is not something that anybody can control. Even people in power seem to not have control of this. The other nice thing is like if we know anything about the power of NAR and NAHB, especially their lobbying efforts, we know that there are people in the room arguing to keep this as stable as possible because of the ripple effects that it has throughout the economy and for themselves. So yes, it is a question mark, but you hope that the trade groups that kind of back our industry are having the right conversations there.
That's right. And so this next graph here, this is a typical one. I know everyone probably looks at it every month when the data comes in. We're looking at building permit starts and completions. And these graphs can get a little messy with these three overlapping lines. Again, with these boxes, the red box is really just the last 90 days. And the numbers you see on the left are the year over year numbers. And so what I really wanted to draw out in this is the fact that year over year, even with all the uncertainty that has been felt, in October, November, December, we look at these year over year numbers from the December data. Permits and starts were only down 1.7 and 0.7. That's a very small pullback. You can hardly even classify it as a pullback. That really speaks more towards strategic risk management with builders, of just being more intentional about the projects they're starting, the homes they're starting, but not this gigantic pullback and that you would see in incredibly hard market conditions and incredibly fraught future conditions as well, where we see those numbers drop even more drastically. And the completions number is up just because we did build a lot of houses over the last construction cycle, so we are starting to complete those now. But that was the big thing I wanted to point out with this graph, is that there was this strategic small pullback that we would expect when things get a little tighter, when things get a little more uncertain, but no big ripcord being pulled. We didn't see permits drop 20%, nationwide or anything like that. And we expect this trend, probably at least until we get in tune with what this new normal is and what it feels like. So I do expect some volatility around this, but in the sense that it's going to be small moves, not in these large, gigantic moves.
Yeah, awesome. Let's keep it going with okay, there are all these different graphs out there. What does it kind of not boil down to, but what does it all kind of translate to?
Yeah, this is the last slide. I promise, guys, you've held on to the data. I really appreciate it. So specifically looking at the yellow line here, and if you can sift through it, that's the builder confidence score that comes from the NHAB home market index, the HMI. That really tries to put a finger on the pulse to builder confidence at any given level. The yellow line, again, is that central metric. The gray line is their feeling over the next 6 months. How is your next 6 months shaping up to be? What do you expect it to be? The brown line is their present sales conditions, and then white is traffic. And I know that line, Sarah probably hates to see it being down there, but so much opportunity for builders to help drive, maybe not necessarily quantity, but the quality of traffic, getting the right people in the door that are hearing the right message in the right way. The story with this graph recently has been the separation of the next 6 months projection. You can see kind of the last 90 days, it's separated from the others pretty dramatically. There was this huge uplifting feeling that, okay, the next 6 months is going to be better. December happened, or this is January data, January happened, and there was a little bit of a correction. It looks really steep, but I think when we zoom out, that the watermark, the bench line here, is that black dotted line, which is the 50 number. So basically, scores above 50 are optimistic, scores below 50 are pessimistic. With the total builder confidence is 42. Yes, it is below 50, but not by a gigantic amount. If you zoomed out on this over a large period of time, you'd see that number low, much lower in other time periods. And even that next 6 months number, while it did have a drop, it's still at 46. It's still the highest of the metrics, the sub indices that make up builder confidence right now. So overwhelmingly, there is still optimism going into this year, into what sales and marketing and operational success can mean.
How much do you think the traffic is kind of the tail that wags the dog here for the builder confidence?
It's a great question. I think we all know what it feels like when you have more chances at bat, when you have people walking in your door, you have people interacting with your website and with your OHC and with your online chat. You feel that activity more. And I think we all know what it feels like when only one person has walked into a model in the course of a month, in some very struggling situations. So I do think that, beyond the data side of it, there is a feeling that is very, I think, real for builders and sales leaders in the field. When traffic feels low, everything kind of feels low and depressed. And I think it's incumbent upon us to shift that a little bit, because we can see traffic numbers have consistently been the lagging measure on this for all 5 years on this graph. It's been that way for other cycles as well. So kind of adjusting that sense of, okay, I'm not going to have 100 people walk through my model this week, and that's okay and that's normal. I'm going to have 8, and 6 are going to be my buyer and really qualified, and just kind of shifting how we're perceiving what traffic is and what it should be and how we should be interpreting it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dan. It's truly an amazing resource to have someone like you at kind of like the disposal of a builder. I wish every builder had an analyst like Dan to kind of walk through not just the what, but the why of each of those stats and the opportunities that it presents. So shifting gears here, that's the current environment we see ourselves in to start off in Q1 of this year. So I want to move to Eric here and talk a little bit more about the buyer mentality and where we see some opportunities to make this a great year within that environment. So Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Brett. And just want to start a little bit more on the data train, but we will turn off of it. But kind of, what remains and what's changed. What remains, there is outlook uncertainty. When you look at the consumer populace, there's a lot of uncertainty there. There's some fear that still remains. Affordability is a factor. We're not necessarily saying rates are, the rate shock is still a factor, but affordability, is a factor. With all that being said, people still need homes, and they need new homes, and there are still sales to be had, sales that are happening. And so what's changed when we're looking at, the last 90 days or really any time frame as we're projecting out for 2025? What we're also seeing, and this isn't really anecdotal, this is data, is, we have over 500 new home salespeople, and we support additional 600 indirectly. We're not seeing a lot of people objecting over rates as the first thing that comes, out of the mouth. And so there's an opportunity there where the shift in discussions that we're having with our traffic that is coming in can now shift away from this cost to now let's start talking more about value. And what that means to each individual buyer is a little bit different. It's a little more nuanced. There are more options available for buyers out there. There are more players in these sandboxes in all of the different markets. And I think that competition provides another opportunity for specific builders to position themselves for 2025 to rise above the pack, to position themselves to maximize this wave of opportunity that is coming. It might not be a massive wave of opportunity. The seas might be a little choppy, but do we have the right board? Are our muscles strengthened? And are we positioned well to catch as many waves as possible? I think that's really what we're talking about here today. And, how can we leverage our positioning against the competition? And we want to kind of frame that into what Dan kind of said, is that every up bat really, really matters right now, Brett.
Yeah, and I think it's been so hard for us to turn that off, right? Because it happened for so long during COVID that it was just a numbers game, right? The shotgun approach. If I remember talking to builders who were like, we have a list of 100 people, and if somebody doesn't want it, we just cross them off and we're on to the next person.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely not what the environment is today. But I do know a lot of builders, they may have tweaked some things, but I don't think they've changed a lot of their tactics going into this environment from where we were before. So I want to talk a little bit more about okay, where in your mind is the opportunity for this to be a great year here?
Yeah, this is something that we hold true in our own approach to both the sales and the marketing, of homes. We all can take a step back and say, of all the purchases that a customer will make in their life, the probably most emotional one that they'll ever make is buying a home. And I think for certain price points, it's extremely an emotional purchase. And so we are of the belief that customers will buy with emotion and they'll justify that with logic. And there's a lot of noise that is out there. And, you know, communicating that value, what we really need to do is we need to tie them down emotionally to our offerings. And I think that happens when we're looking at the customer journey. That is happening before they even walk into your model. That is, what is that story? What are we communicating to drive awareness of our offering? You know, our marketers like Sarah is doing a really good job, by the way. And then what are we doing for them to actually consider me as a builder? And then how am I getting them into my model? And what am I doing to do so? And then when they're there, am I continuing that same feel and all those things that we're doing to align, knowing where buyers are right now? And we have to motivate them. We have to motivate them to come in. We have to motivate them to commit. And there's certain things that tie into that emotion, but also being hyper aware of what, putting ourselves in those buyers' shoes. There is a lot of noise right now, but buyers are still buying. We're seeing some builders are in specific markets and specific offerings. They're already having, you know, a decent year. And there are others out there that are a little bit more challenged. So, you know, motivating your buyer, what does that mean? Making them feel like they're in the right place, you know, at the right time. Are we painting pictures for them to understand that there is a bit of uncertainty? I think builders are in a position to be the engineers of stability for these buyers, the architects of hope, for that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and to own that, and to do that in both the marketing and the sales front, and making it easy. This is one thing that we're seeing across the lines too, is, you know, are we making it easy for them to make this decision, or are we overwhelming them when they're already overwhelmed? That's the last thing, you know, we want to do. And then if we look at, okay, if we want to motivate our buyer, well, we believe that we need to know our buyer. And that's not just saying, putting a label on the buyer and saying, oh, they're a family and they're at this price point, but are we utilizing some type of segmentation? And one thing that our builder partners benefit from with one of our tools is we survey every closing. We survey buyers, and we're talking 7,000 to 8,000 home closings a year. And we use those survey data to help drive insights on our own buyer segmentation modeling, to get really deep into that buyer segment psychology of, this is how this buyer actually buys. These are the hot buttons that we want to be mindful of. And this is the type of discovery that our sales teams need to be conducting to really pull back those layers of the onion and get down to that why. And really, that's, I think, what's going to help even motivate them, you know, to the sale. And so, are we employing, the kind of question I think I want to pose to builders is, are we employing these tactics? Are we including this level of intelligence, you know, in our efforts? And for the builders that are saying, yes, we absolutely are, it's going to be I think those are the builders that are going to have a really great year, Brett.
Yeah, I think you know, you touched upon it a little bit, but I want to dig a little bit deeper into like making it easy for the buyers, right? So there's a traditional model of like how builders want their buyers to interact with their brand, interact with their homes, interact with their people. And that might not be what a buyer wants to do anymore. And some of it's COVID, some of it's just natural evolution, some of it's generational, but if you have the exact same playbook, even pre-COVID, that like today that you had before, just to understand that things have changed. Like what you thought was easy 7 years ago isn't as easy as it is today. So perfect example is like we see people say, builders say, we want to shuttle everybody into the model. And we want to have somebody talk to our salesperson and then go out and see what else is there. That might not be what a buyer wants to do. So what are you doing to try and align with that? That's great. Now you touched upon like some of the principles, and it also sounds like, you know, you're not treating every lead equal, right? And part of that is like the segmentation. How are you guys talking to your builders about how do you actually employ some of that?
Yeah, so we have a couple different tactics that we use to bring the science back into the sale. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a time and place for the art of the sale, but let's provide a structure and a process to the sale, if you want to call it that. I think there's even a piece to be said about the marketing side. You know, one that provides a little bit more measurability, a little bit more repeatability and scalability. And let's, just like when we pour a foundation and we put up the sticks and we provide that structure, let's provide some structure where that art can exist inside of it. And that allows us a little bit more control. And there are different pieces that we use in our playbook, but the one thing we wanted to touch upon today is this principle approach to our efforts. And when all things, we lose control of the sale, or we don't have everything at our disposal for whatever reason, there's lots of different variables that come to play. At a minimum, we want to employ these principles, and it's helps us understand how buyers buy. And if we can align better with that, as far as even getting them into the model and then taking them through that customer journey from purchasing and even further on, as we're trying to get them to the closing table and actually really get that win at the end of it, we want to guide the buyer through the most favorable thought process. And it goes right back to what you just said is, unfortunately, yeah, we do have to take some steps back, and how can we align better, with these buyers? And these aren't questions that were being asked 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, because they didn't need to be asked. And this is what we're saying now, is that this is really where we're at. It needs to be asked, and it's actually a positive thing. And one thing we understand about buyers is just the way they're conditioned to buy. They buy at the bottom of the funnel. They're going to come in and ask about pricing or terms. They might ask about incentives. They might ask about a specific home site that has a feature that they're looking for, a specific type of floor plan with the layout. They're buying at the bottom of the funnel. And we want to acknowledge that. That's okay that they start there, but if I'm going to approach this a little more strategically on the sales side, well then, and I want this to be a discussion not about costs, but about value, then I want to get them at the top of the funnel and tie them down on my area. Especially if I'm looking at a transitory buyer who is actually spending the weekend, maybe hitting a series of cities up and down the coast of Florida. Or for another number of examples, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but we want to tie them down and get these little yeses. You've got to tie them down on the area. Why me as a builder and my story and all that I do to differentiate myself, where's my value as a builder, and defend that value and getting the buyer to say, yeah, that's something I could get behind. And the same thing with the community and so on. And so this is our first step when we're looking at the actual sales process that can better align with where buyers are, and to help that discussion be kind of shift away from cost and maybe in some of these negative things and get it back to a discussion of value.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point. Not a single builder I've ever talked to in my 8+ years in the industry has said like, oh yeah, we're just like that other builder, right? Every builder feels like they're unique, but do your salespeople know how to tell your story?
Right.
Because that is ultimately what matters when you're talking about the buyer side. So let's keep it going here. Whoops. Yeah, what's guiding principle number 2 here?
So when we talk about differentiating between wants and needs, that seems pretty elementary. But I want to stop on that word differentiate, because for one buyer profile versus another, those wants and needs can kind of shift and change. And it's not necessarily what we're showing them, but it really comes down to how we're communicating that. That's where the magic happens. It's in the how. And I spoke about this as these target consumer profiles. These are just a quick handful. We have many, many more. And based upon actually surveying buyers and even evolving and elevating our own way that we looked prior to these, what we call TCPs, and making sure that we can easily understand and put a specific buyer that might be a primary, and there might be a secondary. We have a lot of communities, and Dan and I have worked on this together before, where a project where we're trying to identify what is that ideal TCP for a specific community. There may be a primary and a secondary. And to be able to differentiate wants and needs, all we're saying here is let's take the time to really understand and know our buyer. And this segmentation modeling allows us to do that because it's based on data and not the way we feel or the way we think or the way we hope.
Yeah, please, please, please abandon your guts. Make decisions based on data, make decisions based on experience, but please just don't do it because it feels right. All right. So walk us through a little bit about, what we're seeing here. Paint a picture versus a blank canvas.
Yeah, I think when we're when we're looking at our marketing approach, it even comes back to the training about what words we use. There's stronger power words that you can use. Here, what we're saying is that knowing that there's from a buyer standpoint, the future is uncertain. It's less predictable from their vantage point, and they're looking for it to be easy. This is the opportunity builders have. And look at the way that you're marketing that home. And we're talking about traffic here, and we're trying to get buyers in. I'm a proponent and of the school now that your actual model home is your website, and you win them there, and then they're willing to come in, right? And maybe there's some other inbound pipeline channels that you're utilizing to either get them to a website or a landing page, whatever tactics that you're employing. Let's make steps to actually paint as much of the picture for them, tell those stories, take those steps to reduce that uncertainty. Even if we're looking at home sites, dirt home sites versus an inventory home, what we're not saying is, oh, you need to go all inventory, because that might not be right for your specific market. But there's things that you can do if you have a lot of dirt to make it the perception to be that there's a picture being painted for me of what that home could look like, on that lot. And this can translate into other tactics and strategies as well. But let's take a step back and ask the questions: Are we doing enough to paint that picture? Are we doing enough to alleviate some of that, uncertainty, and to provide some stability, on that marketing side to help drive that traffic?
Yeah, and it's not easy. Like, we all know that, but it's worthwhile, right?
Yes.
So making sure that, it's going back to, it should be easy for the buyers, might not be easy for us as builders, but it might be some hard work to get there. So appreciate that, Eric. I'm going to shift gears and then we're going to bring it back in here. So Sarah, I assume just AI is doing your job at this point, so we can just skip your section. No, I'm
Yes.
just kidding.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just sitting here. It's fine.
So you are kind of like our pseudo anthropologist. Like, I want to get into, like, what are you doing today? Why are you feeling good about this year? And kind of like walk us through, like, where are the opportunities for marketers today?
Yeah. So marketing is the best job, because opportunity is what we do. We literally create more opportunities, more ideas, more optimism, more positivity. Like, that's our job, is to stay in that zone. So all the headlines, all the what ifs, our job is to stay above that, ahead of that. We need to always be looking and inspiring ourselves, filling our cups back up to really say, like, what can we do next? We have to be looking towards the future. And so when things get tough, I think the best thing to do is to start back at the, why are we doing this? What are we doing? And how can we get there? So I had to start some, just get back into that mindset, stay curious, stay willing to learn, willing to try new things, so that you're not, like you said, just making it up and coming from your gut. Have like real conversations, real brainstorming sessions around this. So I'm reading it for the second time, but this is Marketing. Seth Godin's book is so great. Such a good time to really look at, what is your smallest viable market? Why are people in search of better? And the people like us, chapters, are what are calling to me right now, is really honing in on what is our job every day and making sure that marketing stays focused on that. During times like this, it can get really easy to say, throw an incentive out there and just blast it to everyone. But that's not what everyone is going to be converted by. Not everyone in the market is caring about interest rates in the same way. So whatever you put out there it might resonate with someone, but it might also not resonate with someone. So thinking as marketing is deeper than that. It's not just a tagline. It's not just a catchphrase. It can't just be a headline. We have to care at a deeper level than that. And then for some daily inspiration, I love 1000 Watt. They put some great newsletters out there every week. And so most recently, they sent out to the Extraordinary Marketing Department's one, like This Is Next in Marketing, and then Murder of Crows, talking about AI, and that, like, we can use AI to do parts of our job, but we shouldn't have it do all of our parts. And we have to be aware of what we're choosing to do. So the Murder of Crows piece was just talking about, like, two different people using the same exact phrase for no reason other than they used AI, and AI gave them both the same phrase, because AI doesn't know that you are in the same office as your coworker. I mean, it might, but it also just will keep regenerating the same thing. It's just trying to make you happy, and it doesn't know what's going to make you happy. It's just going to keep trying. We can be better at it than AI in that way. Part of that is by learning and being creative and curious about things. And then the extraordinary marketing departments one was just, I know Brett and I both connected on it, but like, it is such a beautiful reminder of like what you do in marketing. What is your skill set? What is your superpower? I actually had me and my team all got together and like divvied up, like, okay, what do you want to be good at this year? What do you want to get better at? And like, let's identify, we all need to be doing these things. So who's going to take what? And then let's push forward and figure out how we do that. And really, we have to stay curious. So learning from each other. Builders, yes, we're all unique. That's why we should be being more collaborative with each other than fighting against each other. We can have great ideas and remix them as our own. We can have, we all have a unique value proposition. We need to know what it is. And then you're not stealing from anyone, or you're not hiding out by yourself. We can do better things if we work together. New homes is really what builders are all focused on promoting. And there's so much need for everyone to be speaking from that same proposition. Buying a new home versus an existing home. That's the builder marketer's line. And we can all be speaking from that same position, and then having our own unique take on it. And then learning from your team, making sure that everyone on your team has a voice, feels like they can have a voice, is doing their research, is staying engaged. And then most importantly, learning from your customers. So your customers are going to give you the most information about what you should do, what you should try, what is working, what is not working. We can all sit in our offices and think we know what is right, but our customers are going to tell you what is actually right for them. And that starts by talking to them.
And
yeah,
I
go ahead, Brett.
what Dan was showing us before is like, there's never really been a year or two period in history where buyers have seen as many listings for new construction as they have previously, because traditionally, like, the long-term average for new con was about 10% of the market share. And in some markets, it's 50%. On average, we're about 15 to 25%. So that education piece, and like next week for anyone going to IBS, is a perfect opportunity. Like, a rising tide does lift all boats. So being able to work with your colleagues, work with the builder down the road from you, and try and get that educational piece up is so important. So I'm so happy to hear that you're kind of focused on that, not just with your team, but other people within the industry. Walk us through kind of like, what are you working on this year? I mean, obviously it's a year with, as we kind of saw, like, quality over quantity is definitely the name of the game there. Like, what is Eastbrook focused on?
Yeah, so starting right from that learn from your customers piece. I mean, these are 3 examples of recent social media posts that we have out there, and we do this a variety of ways. So when someone purchases with Eastbrook Homes, they receive a design and lifestyle questionnaire, and it asks them a bunch of questions about their design preferences. But the first part is just about them. Why did you choose this floor plan? Why did you choose this community? Why did you choose this area? What's making you want to build a home right now or buy a home right now? Where else have you lived? Who else lives in the home? What are their names? What do they love? And then most importantly, why did you choose Eastbrook? And so by asking them, I mean, they just signed their contract. They get this questionnaire right after their contract is accepted. And so we have had such an amazing response from this. I mean, so many internal people were like, no one's going to tell you this. They're definitely not going to upload a photo, and they're definitely not going to say you can just willy-nilly share it on social. 40% of the people who fill it out say, yes, feature me on social. So people do want to be part of this. They purchased with you for a reason. They're very emotionally tied to your brand. Don't discount that with your own anxieties and fears about what sometimes internal people, I don't want to be on social media. That's fine. Our customers do want to be on social media, many of them. And so the first post here is they just had such a lovely, we just literally quoted right from their design and lifestyle questionnaire, why they built with us. and they've built before and they loved our home. Like they are so excited and they haven't even done anything other than sign a contract. That's such a beautiful story to tell people. And then the next one here is closing. So we ask, closing people who are closing, can we send a photographer out to your closing? Do you want to be in the photos? Do you want them featured on social? And we get a lot of them who say yes. For us, it gets us great photos of homes that aren't just showcase homes. And then it also gives us quotes from customers and photos of customers happy in their home. And then we share those photos with them. And then they can go on social media and be like, check out the professional photos of my house that we included with that home for you. And then the other one is we go back. So we'll touch back with people a couple years after they've been in their home and ask them if they want to be a homeowner highlight. Sometimes we don't even have to ask. They contact us and say, hey, I saw you did a blog. I want to be a blog. Like I want to have a homeowner highlight. So like by focusing your brand and your customers' stories, you really create this lovely, I want to be those people. I want to do what those people are doing. And you're creating amazing content that is going to convert far better than any catchy incentive line or any promise for dollars. It's going to catch them where in their soul, their heart and soul, which is what we need to be focusing on, is that want. They want a new home. They want to be like Brittany and they want to be like Jacqueline and Chris and Jira and Karen. Like they want to see themselves in those homes. So staying focused on your buyers.
Yeah, and I know this isn't where you've stopped, so you
No.
are continuing to push the envelope here. What is
Yes.
here?
So it's always good to look at your brand. What are you doing? I mean, I'm a graphic designer by, went to school for graphic design, am a graphic designer, but at the end of the day, we just get busy. Marketers are really busy. We can't always pay attention to everything. We have a lot of things we have to stay focused on. So remember to look at your brand. Try to critique yourself. So we rebranded 8 years ago. It was our 50th anniversary. We had a new logo. We went from 3 trees with a pastel palette to 1 tree with a green palette. And we were really excited. We launched that everywhere. We were using a light blue and the greens, and we're really trying to freshen and fun into the marketplace. And that has been so successful for us. And now we're looking at, okay, it's been 8 years. It's our 58th anniversary this year. And now, like, how can we move the envelope forward? What else exists? What else can we improve on? And so we really looked at first signage. Like people are driving around, even though we can't always, get that lead source. I mean, we forget how much people just drive into our communities and what are they feeling when they drive in? And this really hit home when I went and visited our communities. Please, marketers, go drive through your communities, because when you drive in and you see, I mean, these signs look not that bad, but some of them are bad. And we need to make sure that our communities are feeling as good as our websites and our Zillow listings and our content that we're putting out there. So we didn't rebrand, I'm calling it a brand glow up, but we just refreshed everything, making our signs more visible. A white sign costs the same amount as a really colorful sign. Like add more color into our landscape. We live in Michigan, so it's cold and snowy here, and I was really wanting to see some color out there. So we're just, streamlining our brand. We're, upgrading and making things feel a little bit more fun and refined. So focus on that. When you can't control anything else, control what you're putting out there in the world.
Yeah, love to see it. And again, that's not the end.
No, part of that. So as you're looking at something like a brand glow up instead of a rebrand, we're not doing the whole thing. We're just looking at what are the feature colors. So before we were using the more like teal color, and now we're moving into more of our dark, we call it our lake blue, and now we're moving into our darker lake blue to add some more contrast. If you stay focused on like cultural trends and what colors are out there, people like contrast. They wanted a little more darker, moodier colors are coming back. So really looking at what color are you putting out there. We have a lot inside of our brand of colors we can choose from, but trying to look at your website constantly. I mean, we redid our website, 8 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, and now it's time again. Please look at your websites more. Make sure that they're functioning. We have massive websites because we've got a page for everything, a community, a listing, a home plan, And so really focusing on what you're putting out there and refresh it. It's a really important thing. I mean, we have a lot of return build people who come back and build with us again. And 3 years is about, what we see is like, hey, I built a home 3 years ago. I want to build again. That's amazing. But I don't want to look exactly the same as I did 3 years ago if you're going to come back and build with us. So looking at this has been a fun project. I think the most important one for us has really been the city pages. So looking at that, like, what are we focused on as builders? We have to think, like Eric was talking about that area, that location, and really bringing in more awareness to our SEO. It's not just our community. Builders tend to be very focused on branding a specific community, but the people are moving to an area. So let them fall in love with the area too, not just your community. And so we're including, frequently asked questions, again, wanting to survey our buyers. Like, why did you move to Rockford? What do you love about Rockford? What are your favorite restaurants? Asking them so that those frequently asked questions are coming from the people that are going to be their neighbors when they move to Rockford. So keep an eye on your websites, really make sure that you're always looking back at these things and keeping them constantly refreshed.
Yeah, I want to skip the next slide just for time, but I want to get your kind of insights as like, okay, so we have a lot of things going on. You've done a lot. What are you excited for looking forward this year?
Yeah, so we are launching over 400 new home sites this year. So we're a developer and a builder in the West Michigan area and Greater Lansing area. So we're bringing on a lot. That's across like 12 different new communities, new phases in communities. So we're bringing on a lot. We've really been trying to revolutionize our pre-sale process, building out those tasks, really looking at like, how are we going to launch all of this with a team of 4 and figure out how to do all of the work. So we have a really exciting process. We have a lot of new things coming to our areas. And then we're most excited that we're going to be having a customer portal. So we'll be working with the team over at Foundation to build out our Eastbrook Homes app to really have a customer portal that every customer will get access to. They'll be able to keep it for the life of their home and be able to have all of their selections in there and their appliance warranties and really keep returning to that. But it allows our team to communicate them in one format. So they know where to come talk to us, talk to a variety of team members. Builders have so many people talking at their customers throughout that whole process, trying to streamline that. So I'm really excited about that piece of it, bringing more technology into things.
Yeah, and that goes back to Eric's part of like, is it easy? And
No.
not just getting them in the door and getting them to sign that contract, but from the contract until close, is that part easy too? So
Right.
awesome to hear that you're investing there. So I just want to be cognizant of the time here. We're going to, if you guys are interested in like specifically why we're so optimistic as a salesperson, come see us during IBS. Enter Now will also be part of the new Homestar booth. Sarah will be popping around all the educational sessions. But I do want to leave some time for Q&A. So if there are any questions from the crowd, feel free to pop them in to the chat. Now, I saw 1 or 2 of them already come through and get answered. So thank you, Dan. All right. If there are no questions, then we can wrap this up. So you guys kind of came here for, why are we so...
One.
Oh, here we go. Are you concerned at all with some buy downs coming to term and folks needing to sell, adding more resale comp? Dan, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one we've gotten before. We certainly expect to see that play out, but the sheer quantity of adjustable rates and buy down implications from existing home mortgages is still such a small portion of active loans out there. So very much like we're seeing delinquency rates increase, and if you look at a percentage number, the percentage looks very high, but when you look at the actual volume of those numbers that are making it up, it's still very low. So this is something that's certainly on the radar of a lot of data scientists, but nothing that we think is going to move the needle significantly that we're going to necessarily need to put any different operational guidelines in place or strategic considerations in place just for this year. But it's a great question. We'll continue to watch it.
Awesome. Got it. Steve, I will share your contact info with Eric. Eric put together the slides, so I'll have him share the ones that he just skipped over with you. Again, ultimately, you guys came here trying to figure out why are we so optimistic for the year? So I want to end with that. If you could boil it down to kind of one main thought to leave people with, Dan, why are you optimistic for this year?
I think it's probably one of the most boring answers, but it's this idea of this deviation towards the norm of becoming back to what a typical market levels are, for better and for worse. I think we were very in the thralls of tons of sales, tons of margin, and we kind of forget when that's happening that that's also not normal. And when we sign up to all be in new construction, we sign up for seasonality, and sometimes that literally means seasonalities within a year, and sometimes that means seasons as in multiple years, different economic cycles that we're riding this wave. So this, I'm looking forward to this deviation back towards what historical norms look like, and some of the reliability that comes along with that too.
Awesome. Eric, how about you?
I'm going to try to base mine on as data as much as I can. And I think this harkens back to some of the things that Sarah pointed out that Eastbrook is doing, is that we've had a record sign up for builders in our Builder Solutions Group program. And it's more of our a la carte offering. And that tells me that there are builders out there that are taking intentional steps to position themselves to make 2025 the greatest year they can make it. And that gives me hope that builders are making those investments and they're taking those steps much more than ever before. And so that's what I'm going to lean on as the data, is that I'm actually going to, the builders are leading me to that optimism.
Awesome. Sarah.
I mean, I'm always an optimistic person, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's just more fun to be able to convert people with more strategy behind it. At least that's how I look at it. I mean, COVID was not fun in a way that I would want to repeat. So, traffic is important, but conversions are where we get the magic. So traffic on my website doesn't get me excited. Those appointments, those sales, that's exciting. And so, stay focused on what actually moves the needle. Yes, traffic is an indicator, but it doesn't have to be. And I think this is what Eric's slides we're going to say, but it's conversions. That's what we can focus on. And you convert people by connecting with them. And that's really what marketing and sales is all about, is connecting with people, hearing their stories. And there will always be a story to tell. No matter what the market looks like, there was always a positive story in that for someone. Someone was getting their brand new home, their first home, their 15th home. People are excited, and you can always draw from your own customers' optimism. They're the ones purchasing with you. Let them be your guiding light.
Yeah, I love it. And I guess from my standpoint, no matter how you feel about this current market and this environment, there are other people who feel the same way as you. And if you are looking for help, there's never been a better year to get it. Whether that is the Shin Consulting groups, your Builder 20 groups. I can say personally, from a vendor standpoint, there's never been stiffer competition from vendors. So as a vendor, we are meeting builders much closer to the middle and less, way more customization to fit your needs, as opposed to just saying, this is our solution, take it or leave it. So I want to thank everyone for joining us on the webinar today. Thank you very much for joining us on your lunch break or whatever break you had. Really hope to see as many people as possible next week in Vegas. And if not, then we hope to talk to you soon. Thank you, everyone.